Well, most Reformed apologists do not reject deductive or inductive reasoning as such. I was on Eli Allah's podcast the other month, and he's always apt to talk about how he will sit down with a napkin at a restaurant and draw out the Kalam argument and argue with the other person about how important that proof is. But when we talk about our initial starting point, that's where presuppositionalists want to say, well, hold on, let's figure out where we're coming from here, and then we'll get into the second step. So inductive and deductive reasoning aren't off the table. However, they typically do reject deductive and inductive apologetic arguments. For Van Til, a deductive apologetic argument would require agreement between the Christian and the non-Christian on the premise or the premises, and such agreement does not exist, he says. So Reformed apologists also warn against defending Christianity on the basis of epistemology that does not provide proper grounds for deduction and induction. So again, that's where you're going to find the catchphrase of "by what standard" and how do you know that? Right. The Greg Kokel tactics point of view is able to be used here in Reformed apologetics because we're wanting to know. First of all, there's no agreement for initial starting points between the Christian and the non-Christian, according to presuppositionalists. And then we have to figure out by what grounds are we able to even point to the basis of the non-Christian believing in deduction and induction. And they might believe it in the sense of wanting to use it, but going back to a step further and saying, according to your worldview, how do you know that induction is possible when there's issues with induction? Hume's famous for this, or deduction. How do we know that those things follow from the premise? How are we certain that laws of logic are able to be used in whatever the person you're sitting across from? It doesn't have to be atheistic, but it's just a non-Christian point of view. Well, the proper grounds cannot itself be epistemological, since one cannot ground an epistemology on an epistemology. So, okay, what's your ultimate standard? Well, this one. Okay, well, how do you know that? Well, I appeal to this one. Well, hold on. Okay, then we need to talk about that one, because we're trying to go back to what's the starting point, not how you do it or what's step 5. We want to get back to step 1 and see from where do you start with. But the epistemology can't be answered with epistemology, but it must be answered with a metaphysics or a view of reality, or what is known as the worldview. And so that's one of the key terms here for presuppositionalists or Reformed apologetics is worldview. Thus, Reformed apologists insist that apologetics ultimately involves a conflict between Christian and non-Christian worldview. It's always going to be butting heads because the initial starting point, the foundation, how you view all reality, how you get to different levels of knowledge, is in conflict with each other at all times. And so we have to figure out then how do we argue from there.
Right. And so according to Van Til, only a transcendental argument can validly be used to prove the reality of God. He says, now the only argument for an absolute God that holds water is a transcendental argument. A deductive argument, as such, leads only, notice, from one spot in the universe to another spot in the universe, right? And so also an inductive argument, as such, can never lead beyond the universe. And so to argue by presupposition, then, is to indicate what are the epistemological and metaphysical principles that underlie and control one's method, right? So we're going to push the unbeliever with regard to the basis of their reasoning and their argumentation, right? And their probabilities, right? What's the basis of that? We're not going to just give that to them. Well, let's assume we all have reasoning. Well, okay, well, no, we're not going to do that, right? We're gonna push further back than that. What's the basis of that assumption, right? And go from there.
Right, right. Let's say that the evolutionist is correct. In the grand scope of everything, we've all evolved in certain capacities, and some greater than others, some lesser than others, some at different points. Some may have diverged at different areas. Some may be evolving further. And so, how do we know that the reason that's in our head that evolution has given us is true, is an outward expression of the real world? And how do we know that the person sitting across from me at the table is of the same developmental persuasion as I am? Or maybe I'm lower, and so I have a different truth of obtaining knowledge, and that's true for me, but then it's true for you. So we get into the sticks there if we just assume from that point.